it's time. Hi folks, Harry here, and this is my updated list for my top 10 favourite Stephen King books. So, I will be uploading this video on the 28th of January 2021, 1 year after I uploaded my top 10 favourite Stephen King books video, which at the time of filming now has 4,500 views and is easily the most popular video on my channel. To this day, I still get comments on that video all the time telling me to read other Stephen King books. But because I made that video 1 year ago, this list has changed drastically. I have now read 50, yes, 50 Stephen King books. So now I feel a little bit more qualified to give you my top 10 list. In case I didn't make it entirely clear, I have not read every single Stephen King book. I'm currently in the middle of Desperation, but I don't feel like that's going to end up in my top 10, and I'll leave any other Stephen King books that I haven't yet read in the description below, so that you know which ones I've read and which ones I haven't. And without further ado, let's get into my most anticipated video of my channel's history, my top 10 favourite Stephen King books. This is going to be a long video. So my 10th favourite Stephen King book of all time is The Institute. The Institute is a very nostalgic pick for me because my first ever YouTube video was my review of The Institute. It's a really, really bad video, do not watch it, but this book will always have a soft place in my heart just because it's what started Other Worlds Than These. Or at the time, if you remember, I used to be called Reader of King. So The Institute follows a boy named Luke Ellis who is abducted by a mysterious organisation. All of these kids are taken to the Institute, and it is revealed to us that they all have either telekinetic or telepathic powers. Not including later, coming out in March, this is Stephen King's most recent novel release. And you can just tell that it is written by someone so experienced as a writer. The character work in The Institute is some of the best writing I've ever seen Stephen King put on paper, and this story is just so magical to me. This book, to me, feels like if Carrie, Firestarter, and It all came together and blended, and this came out of it. All of the characters in this book are so powerful, the friendship dynamic is so strong, and the world building is absolutely fantastic. There are some horror elements in this book, and some rather disturbing scenes as well. But at its heart, The Institute is such a heartwarming story about friendship, and I feel like a lot of Stephen King's books that are about children are similar to that. But yeah, I absolutely love The Institute, not only because it's a fantastic novel, but also because it's very nostalgic for me. So my 9th favourite Stephen King book is going to be Pet Sematary. Oof, Pet Sematary, oh my god. So Pet Sematary follows the Creed family as they move into this new house in Ludlow, Maine. This house seems perfectly safe, but every so often, massive trucks come along this road. But also, leading from the house, there is this path that leads to this pet cemetery, a place where all of the kids who live in the area for the last few decades have been burying their pets as a coping mechanism. But also, beyond the pet cemetery is another mysterious burial ground. This is very much so a gothic horror novel. It has so many components that I love in a Stephen King book. This is definitely Stephen King's most disturbing and most twisted work. It is a brilliant depiction of grief, death, human emotion, and just has some generally brilliant writing. I have read this book twice, and both times it scared me half to death. Both movies, the 1989 one and the 2019 one, haven't done mere justice for how fantastic this book really is. This book also has some absolutely horrifying scenes that will probably stick with me for the rest of my life, and this book is so special to me. Only 2 books down, I've only been filming for 10 minutes. So my number 8 spot is a very underrated one, possibly, in my opinion, the most underrated Stephen King book, and that is Insomnia. So this 900-page beast follows a man in his 70s named Ralph who starts going through insomnia. He has no trouble getting to sleep, but he starts waking up extremely early, and he starts going out for these walks. But then he starts seeing things in the world that other people can't see. He starts seeing auras around people, and little bald doctors at scenes of crimes. This book is absolutely fantastic, and it drives me insane that so many people just don't talk about it. There are so many things that I absolutely adore about this book. I love how heavily connected it is to the Dark Tower series, which is something I will be talking about later. I absolutely love the unconventional character work and how the protagonists are in their 60s and 70s. There are two characters in this book who I'm not going to mention who are two of my favourite characters in any Stephen King book. And this book did something really unexpected for me. It focused a lot on abortion, and I thought this was a really strange topic for a Stephen King book to discuss. But it added such an interesting dynamic to the story that I just really wasn't expecting. This book is so dark, it is so thrilling, it's gruesome in places, and the ending is one of my favourite Stephen King endings. It's the only way that this story could have ended. And I absolutely love Insomnia. It is so criminally underrated, and I highly recommend that you check it out if you haven't already. So my number 7 spot goes to one of the most famous, if not the most famous, Stephen King book, and that is It. So It was my first ever Stephen King book, and it was my first ever adult novel, it was my first ever horror novel. So this book really does have the nostalgic factor for me. So if you've literally been living under a rock and you don't know what It is about, let me fill you in. So this book is about a demonic entity known as It, or Pennywise the Dancing Clown, that is a shapeshifter that morphs into your deepest, darkest fears. But having said that, I also think that this is one of the most misunderstood and misrepresented Stephen King books, even by his most die-hard fans, because at its heart, It is really a coming-of-age story. It is a drama, and it is so heavily focused on friendship and the bonds that you form when you're kids. So the parts of this book that I love the most aren't the terrifying Pennywise scenes, but the absolutely amazing scenes with the Losers Club. I have to say, there is one scene in this book that just makes me want to implode every single time that I think about it because it's so horrible. But I really don't want to dismiss the entire beauty of this 1,000-page brick just because of one slightly dodgy scene. Well, not slightly, it's the dodgiest thing I've ever read. But needless to say, this is one of the most fantastic horror novels ever written, and I commend Stephen King so much for this book. It is just a pure display of brilliance and how well Stephen King writes. Despite it being a horror novel, it is so magical, and the world building is brilliant, the characters are brilliant, the horror is brilliant, the relationships are brilliant. Oh my god, it's just absolutely fantastic. If you've watched the movie but you have not read the book, I highly recommend that you read the book because it dives so much deeper into everything, and in my opinion it's way scarier as well. So if you're really into the horror part, then I think you would absolutely love the book. So you've got to give it a try. So my number 6 spot is a favourite among King fans, and it is Salems Lot. So Salems Lot is basically Stephen King's take on Dracula. It is set in 1975 in a small town in Maine called Salems Lot, and it follows a writer named Ben Mears who goes to this town and encounters some of the most terrifying vampires ever written about in literature. This is a classic vampire gothic horror novel. Gothic horror is my favourite branch of the horror genre, and I just love it so much. There are so many good things I can say about it. The one thing that I'm not a massive fan of is it is quite slow paced, and this book is 600 pages, and at some points it is a bit of a drag to get through, but it really doesn't matter, because this book is so fantastic. So I absolutely love vampires. I love the terrifying vampire stuff like Dracula and Interview with the Vampire, but I also love the cheesy vampire stuff like Twilight. But I think this is definitely my favourite representation of vampires ever written. It doesn't sexualise them at all like most modern vampire works do. It is just pure, raw, unadulterated monsters, and I absolutely adore it. I also love the small town dynamic that Stephen King absolutely masters. This book is just absolutely brilliant. I've read it twice. I think this was the first Stephen King book that I reread, and there are way too many good things I can say about it. I absolutely love this. I highly encourage you to read Salems Lot if you haven't already. I would also massively recommend this if you've never read a Stephen King book before. I hope you're not afraid of ghosts, because at number 5 is The Shining. A lot of people think that The Shining is overrated, but It deserves all of the attention that it gets. So The Shining follows the Torrance family. Jack Torrance, who is a writer struggling with alcoholism, Wendy Torrance, a brave young woman, and Danny Torrance, a little boy with a power known as the Shining. And Jack has agreed to look after the Overlook Hotel for the winter. But this hotel is haunted and it is filled with ghosts that attack Jack's psyche. So if you've watched Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, you have to read Stephen King's The Shining, because I can think of so many differences. Stephen King famously does not like Stanley Kubrick's movie adaptation, because the movie massively sways from the main themes of the book. And it goes without saying that I love the book infinitely more than Stanley Kubrick's movie. This book massively focuses on family, which is something that Kubrick's movie massively missed out. But it also deals with really heavy topics like abuse and alcoholism. But The Shining is a ghost story. It is a classic, again, gothic horror novel. A lot of people don't really mention that Stephen King writes gothic horror, but he's really, really good at it, especially in the 70s. But I love everything about The Shining. It's a little bit slow moving at first, but once you get going, it really, really comes at you with the terror that is completely unforgettable. Once you read The Shining, it will stick with you forever and haunt you forever. So we're getting ever so close to the top 3, but my number 4 pick is 11/22/63. So 11/22/63 is not a horror novel at all. It is sci-fi, romance, thriller, every other genre you can think of. It is such a fantastic blend of genre. And yes, there are some scary aspects, but it's nowhere near a horror novel. So this book follows an English teacher called Jake Epping, and he finds a portal which takes him to 1958. And he uses this portal to try and prevent the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. But because the portal takes him back to 1958, he has to live out his life for 5 years before he can even attempt to prevent this assassination. But while he is living in the late 50s and early 60s, he forms an amazing relationship with a woman named Sadie. And the relationship dynamic between Jake and Sadie, I cannot stop talking about this. It is just so fantastic. This book is 700 pages. You barely feel it passing. It is so fast-paced. The last 200 pages of this book really made my heart race, and I've never felt anything like it. The ending absolutely destroyed me. This is one of my favourite Stephen King endings of all time. The characters are amazing. The sci-fi elements kind of blend with the thriller elements, and it just creates an amazing mix of genre that just creates something so beautiful. That is one word that I can describe 11/22/63 with. It is just beautiful. You know what? Just for the nostalgia, I'll slurp my coffee. So now, this is serious business. This is my 3rd favourite Stephen King book of all time, and it is The Dark Tower 7, The Dark Tower. The finale to the amazing, brilliant, beautiful, genius, majestic Dark Tower series. This copy is way too heavy. 1 second. That's better. So obviously, because this is the finale to this series, I cannot give you a plot synopsis for this book, but I will tell you what the Dark Tower series is about. So the Dark Tower series follows a gunslinger named Roland and his quartet, which is a group of people who are destined to be together as they go on this journey to find a mysterious black tower. But this dark tower that they are in search of is the centre of the Stephen King multiverse. Every single Stephen King book is connected with every other Stephen King book, and it is because of the Dark Tower. It will make so much more sense once you read it. Stephen King, with the Dark Tower series, created one of the best fantastical universes ever written. So if you've read any of Stephen King's books and you want to find out how they are connected, the Dark Tower series is really the way to go. It is adult, epic, dark fantasy with some horror aspects, some thriller aspects, some romance aspects, some adventure aspects, some drama aspects. It is just an amazing, amazing blend of talent. This is often considered by Stephen King fans to be his ultimate masterpiece, the one thing that he has really poured his heart and soul into. You can tell with every single book in the Dark Tower series how much Stephen King loves this world and how much he loves writing about it. But the last book in the series broke me at so many moments. Characters that I have grown to love so much had some life-changing events happen to them. The ending of this book was not just the ending of this book, it was the Stephen King ending. And I don't know how I didn't see it coming, but it hit me hard. It really hit me hard. Here is some footage of me finishing the Dark Tower series. Okay, I'm having a breakdown. I just finished the Dark Tower series. I'm done. I'm finished. Oh my god. I've finished the Dark Tower series. I don't know how to react. I don't know what to do. Like, what am I supposed to do now that I've finished the Dark Tower series? Like, this probably sounds so dramatic, but this is genuinely how I feel, right? Oh my god. Well, 5 stars. As you can see, I was absolutely bloody distraught, and I didn't know what to do. I had finished the Dark Tower series. It was just so overwhelming for me. That is the one thing that I can say about this book. It is so overwhelming. I could not put this down, and this was the perfect way to wrap up an almost perfect series. I have so much to thank Stephen King for, but this series has done so much for me as a person and as a reader, and it has massively matured me. I feel so much more experienced in life after reading the Dark Tower series, and it's changed my life. It really has, and I cannot thank Stephen King enough for it. So, thank you, Cy King. Long days and pleasant nights. Getting a bit emotional. Oh my god. I didn't realise I loved the Dark Tower series so much. So, my number 2 spot. If you've been a long-time viewer of my channel, you will know that my favourite book of all time for a solid year was Misery by Stephen King. But something overtook it. So at number 2 is Misery. It actually pains me to say that Misery is not my favourite book anymore, but that hasn't changed my immense amount of love for this book. So Misery follows a writer named Paul Sheldon, who is the author of the very successful Misery series. There is a hair inside my copy. This is why I don't like buying used editions. One day, Paul Sheldon gets in a car crash, and he is rescued by what seems to be a very loving woman named Annie Wilkes. But it turns out that she is his #1 fan, and she reads his draft of his most recent Misery novel. But when she finds out that Paul Sheldon has killed off the main character in the series, she is not happy about it. And there are a few things that she has to say. This book is just flat out horror. It is so scary. It is so thrilling. Annie Wilkes is one of my favourite, possibly my favourite villain of any Stephen King book. And this book is just written with so much love, so much passion, so much mastery, and it is a wild roller coaster. This book is really short, which is not typical for Stephen King books. He is known for writing mammoth books like It and The Stand and The Talisman, Under the Dome, like 1,000-page books. But Misery proves that Stephen King can write a really short book and have it be so powerful. In my opinion, this is one of the best horror novels ever written because it is so unique. The vast majority of this book is set in one room, a bedroom, and this book only has 2 central characters, so you'd expect this book to be a little bit weak because of it. But this is one of Stephen King's strongest efforts, and there are just so many good things I can say about this book. I will never stop raving about how amazing this book is and how everyone needs to read it. It's not a perfect book by any means, but it definitely displays Stephen King's incredible talent. I love you, Misery. But there's one book in this world that I love just a tiny bit more. And that one book is Firestarter. This is a very unpopular opinion. I never see anyone saying that Firestarter is their favourite Stephen King book. But let me tell you why this is my favourite Stephen King book and why this is my favourite book to have ever been written in the entire universe. So Firestarter follows a little girl called Charlie McGee who was born with pyrokinesis, which is the power to create fires with just her mind. And the reason why she's had this power is because both of her parents were involved in this drug testing known as Lot 6. And this caused both of her parents to end up with telepathic and telekinetic powers. And there's this government organisation known as the Shop, which are hunting Charlie down so they can weaponize her incredible power. So Stephen King actually originally wanted to ditch this book. He started writing it in the 70s, but he realised that the concept was too similar to his first ever novel, Carrie, and he stopped writing it. But in my opinion, Firestarter is so different to Carrie. The only similarity it has is it is a girl who has some kind of power. That is the only similarity. This book is executed so much better than Carrie because Carrie was his debut novel. It's not perfect by any means. And I think this is one of the best written Stephen King books. I think it is the best executed Stephen King book, and I think it has the best and most engaging plot of any Stephen King book. I read the last 400 pages of this book in one sitting, just on my bed, planning to put the book down, but I found it physically impossible. Firestarter was so compelling to me. The character work was so amazing, and the villain in this book, John Rainbird, is one of my favourite villains of any Stephen King book, and I absolutely love to hate him. But the reason why I hate him so much is he is purely human. Everything he does is purely because he is a massive dickhead. And for Stephen King to write such a despicable, evil, horrible character just makes me so impressed. I massively admire Stephen King for being able to write about someone so horrible. I have to comment on the father-daughter relationship between Andy and Charlie. It's just so amazing. They very clearly have an insane connection to one another. And even the side characters in this book are just so lovable and amazing. And this book really isn't horror as such, it's more of a thriller. This book just gives me so much joy. I already want to reread it, and I read it for the first time maybe 2 months ago, and I already want to read it again and just bathe in its amazingness. Because to me, this is the best Stephen King book, and I don't know if anything will ever beat it. So yeah, these are my top 10 favourite Stephen King books of all time. I'm going to challenge myself to hold all of these books up without dropping a single one for the whole outro. I really hope you enjoyed this very long-awaited video. This is so heavy. I really hope you enjoyed this really long-awaited video. And if you did enjoy it, please give it a big fat thumbs up. And please consider subscribing for more bookish content from me. All of my social media links are in the description below, and I will see you next time with another video. Goodbye. If you were stuck until the end of the video, I'm about to say something that you guys haven't heard for months. Hi folks, Harry, your reader of King here. Whoa, that was insane to say. And I don't think I'm ever going to say it again.